Please stop. Don't come in, I said and tried to stop them. Do you know what living within your means? It's a waste for just two people to live here. From today, we will live here. If you don't want to live with us, you can leave. Oh. But you will pay the bills. We are going through a hard time right now. Families have to help each other, right? I looked at my mother-in-law, who tapped my shoulder, with utter disdain. I am Kathy Baker, 28 years old. I have always loved studying and learning new things. I attended a famous local high school, and I was having a happy life when, during my third year of middle school, my parents died in a car accident caused by snow. I did not know much about what to do when my parents died. So I let others handle the procedures, and there was not much insurance money left. With no relatives, I was advised to go to a facility. But I would only be able to stay there for about 3 years, so I looked for a live-in job. There were limited jobs available for someone who had only completed middle school. However, I managed to get a job at an inn that provided lodging. I was strictly taught the basics, such as how to wear a uniform quickly by myself. My seniors and the landlady were strict but kind to me, who knew nothing. The owner's daughter grew fond of me, and we spent time like family. By the time 10 years had passed, I had become quite proficient at my job and had saved a substantial amount of money. I had a dream. I worked hard to achieve it. The landlady acknowledged my skill at making tea. And I was assigned to make tea at the inn's annual tea enjoyment event. The area where I worked was famous for tea. And the event was held as a part of community contribution with nearby tea farmers and specialty tea shops. I met Phil, who would become my husband, at this event. He was the heir to a long-established tea shop and was nervous at his first event. I was drawn to his gentle and polite demeanor, and after dating for a year, we decided to marry. However, getting married was not straightforward. I thought there might be opposition, which was frustrating but understandable. Considering my background, I thought I might face opposition from the prestigious tea shop. But the reality was much more sinister than I had imagined. You look exactly like a junior high school dropout. The first thing my sister-in-law said when she opened the door and saw me. I was so surprised that I dropped my bag, and my neatly lined up shoes got slightly displaced. Hey! What are you saying, sister? Phil retorted, but this was just the beginning. So, you're a junior high school dropout with no parents? Her words showed no sympathy or comfort, just a cold, mocking tone. Our family is not boasting, but everyone graduated from decent universities. We don't want the blood of a junior high dropout in our family. I never expected to be told something like this. I looked at Phil, but there was no sign that he was going to say anything. You probably don't know the proper way to cook or do laundry since you have no parents, right? We handle formal dress at home, and our kids can do it properly. But our family might be too much for a junior high dropout like you. I could hear my sister-in-law's mocking laugh from the sofa behind me. After a barrage of insults, the room fell silent, and before I could respond, Phil spoke up. Dad, Mom, please stop. Sure, she's not amazingly beautiful for her age and is just a junior high dropout. But she understands about uniform because she works at an inn. And she can handle household chores reasonably well. I've already explained which inn she works at. The owner likes her and thinks she's necessary for our family business. I've already explained that. He then took my hand, mouthed "It's okay," and reassured me. At that moment, I felt uneasy. It sounded like he was marrying me because the owner liked me. After being subjected to heartless insults by my in-laws, my senses were perhaps numbed. And I mistakenly believed that Phil was helping me, that we could manage together. I wanted to get married only after it was properly acknowledged. But Phil said it would be fine if the owner, who was like a parent to him, called his family. It seems his parents are weak against influential people. After the owner called, they immediately agreed to the marriage. I was shocked by how quickly they changed their minds. At that time, my best friend Amy was worried and asked me if it was really okay to get married. I know how hard you've worked. I think of you like a sister, and I want you to be happy. Amy had always been close to me, and she was the same age as my husband-to-be, Phil. The image of Phil I talked about and the Phil Amy knew didn't connect. And she was always worried about me being deceived. For a while after we got married, we lived happily together. Phil enjoyed the meals I cooked, and we thanked each other, spending warm times together. It seemed Amy's worries were unnecessary. I continued working at the inn while occasionally helping out at the family's tea shop, living happily. Then, my mother-in-law fell down the stairs and broke her bone. There had been an incident during the greetings. So I tried to avoid contact with my in-laws as much as possible. Since my sister-in-law was also living with them, I didn't take the situation too seriously. However, Phil suddenly said something outrageous. Mom broke her bone, right? This is a good opportunity, so I've decided we'll live together. One day, Phil suddenly told me this when he returned home from work. We had never discussed such a thing before. I'm troubled by what you're suddenly saying. I have my apartment lease renewal coming up, and even if we did live together, I have my job too. Your sister is living there as well. I could help out by visiting, but... While I was suggesting an alternative with a puzzled mind, suddenly there was a loud noise, and I tensed up. It was the sound of Phil slamming the desk. What? I'm the eldest son, you know? Do you intend to leave everything to others and do nothing? The gentle and calm Phil I knew seemed like a completely different person. And I was completely frozen. That's not, no. Isn't it though? I mean, we took you in when you were an orphan. And there was opposition to our marriage. Don't you think you should work a little and be useful? It's not just about pleasing people. But maybe you can't think that far because you're just a junior high dropout? I couldn't say anything to Phil, who was so different from usual. He was almost like a thug. I was probably trembling, then Phil hugged me as he usually did. It was a moment that should have felt happy, but I only felt fear. Sorry for being harsh, okay? Kathy is a bit silly, so I got frustrated. It's Kathy's fault, you know? But it'll be okay, if you just listen to me, right? You must be feeling anxious, so let's just do this until Mom recovers. Phil spoke kindly as if making a concession, and I began to feel slowly consumed by it. And I did end up going over to care for them a bit, thinking it might improve our relationship. As I would be in a position to be thanked, at least a little. And by the end of the month, I finished organizing the luggage and office procedures while working and moved in. On the day I moved into my in-laws' house, the words my mother-in-law called me into the room to say were enough to break my spirit. Don't think that just because you came to take care of us, you'll be thanked and your status will change. You're a disgrace, a junior high dropout daughter-in-law, and in our house, you're at the bottom. So naturally, you're the last one to use the bath. I was frozen on the spot, sweating coldly, and barely breathing. That breathing became more difficult as I spent more days in my in-laws' house. I could breathe normally when I went to work, but at home, I struggled to breathe and felt suffocated. Eventually, I could no longer smile properly, and my mistakes at work increased. Amy was worried about me, but despite her concerns, I pushed through with the marriage and felt guilty, so I could only say I was fine. However, due to stress, sleepless nights continued, and my health deteriorated. Not wanting to be a burden, I quit my job using my mother-in-law's care as an excuse. I should have properly said goodbye. But by that time, I no longer had the energy to leave the house. And then the days of doing housework while being verbally abused began. How many times do I have to tell you? The taste is too strong. Are you trying to make us sick? You still can't cook properly, can you? I thought it was good, but maybe my taste buds just got used to it. If it had continued like that, I might have been killed, right? Kathy is lucky to be taught cooking by mom. The cleaning is always lacking somewhere. What was the point of marrying an maid then? Phil's insults gradually worsened, and now the previously kind words were no longer spoken. The supposed temporary cohabitation showed no signs of ending. My mother-in-law was still energetically going out to her hula dance hobby today. Phil, turning into a darker and more sinister version of a simple old woman, said the house was stifling and started not coming home after going out drinking. One day, I won't be coming home today, he said, dressed more beautifully than usual and wearing flashy makeup. His sister was soon turning 31. Lately, she had been actively looking for a marriage partner. And despite her sarcastic remarks about how my marriage was only due to her brother losing his mind, or how it was good to have a free maid, she seemed in a good mood recently. Possibly because she had met someone nice. If he's not coming home, I took the opportunity to bathe earlier than usual. Phil didn't come home, and his sister wasn't there either. The bath water was cleaner than when I usually had to be the fifth to bathe. And I was enjoying a leisurely bath. Bang! Suddenly, the bathroom door opened. And I turned around in surprise to find his sister standing there. I could instantly tell that her date today had turned into a disaster. Get out now, slowpoke. Saying that, she pulled me out of the bathtub, and, unbelievably, she left me naked outside the washroom and threw my clothes at my face. My father-in-law was also in the house. I thought it was dangerous, but it was already too late. The noise had attracted my father-in-law, who had apparently been standing behind me at some point. After looking at me as if sizing me up, my father-in-law then. What? I thought it was a good scene. But our useless daughter-in-law is just a skinny old hag with no appeal. No wonder Ken doesn't stay at home. I ran to my room overwhelmed by embarrassment, frustration, and various other emotions. Then, looking at myself in the mirror, I didn't recognize who it was for a moment. I hadn't been able to eat much recently due to being busy and stressed. I knew that, but I looked like a skeleton, with dry hair and a lifeless expression reflected in the mirror. Staring at myself in the mirror, I cried quietly for the first time since coming to my in-laws' house. I must have cried for about an hour before Phil came home. Wow, I thought you were a monster. Crying monster old hag, that's what. Saying that, he laughed as I told him what had happened. Seriously? That's hilarious. Even Dad is making fun of you. He laughed it off, unbelievably. That was the moment something snapped inside me. Why am I obeying these people? What have these years been for? Watching my husband continue to laugh, I swore in my heart that I would get my revenge. And, as if on cue, Amy called me. I hadn't been out recently, so when I tried to dress up, I realized I couldn't fit into any of my pants because I had lost too much weight. So I decided to wear a dress that Phil had given me. Amy burst into tears and hugged me the moment she saw me. I should have come to see you even if you hated it, she said, regretting and comforting me. And then Amy took me to a private room, saying she had something important to talk about. The information Amy shared was shocking, but for me, who had vowed revenge the other day, it was the moment I got the weapon I needed. I also told Amy about everything that had happened up to now, what had happened the other day, and what I wanted to do from now on. Amy was crying as she listened, and at the end, she said, "I'll help as much as needed, and there are plenty of others who can help too. We'll get your happiness back." Then she showed a face like the mischievous child she used to be. I couldn't help but laugh. The fact that I could laugh for the first time in who knows how long made me so happy that I started crying again. I returned home and went about my chores as usual. Today, my mother-in-law criticized me again, but it didn't affect me at all. When Phil came home, I told him we needed to talk. He seemed incredibly annoyed, but I confronted him with a photo. He seemed shaken up but started rambling as if trying to overpower the situation. I just met someone while I was out drinking with friends and had a little fun, that's all. Besides, having a wife who's a clumsy, older, junior high dropout who can't even manage the household or keep a smile. It was tough being at home. It amazed me how easily such words could come from him, as if I was to blame for everything. So, it's my fault, then. Yes, that's right. So I had no choice but to do what I did. He seemed relieved by my words and responded that way. I see. Then let's get a divorce. I'll need to speak to the owner who's been like a parent to us. And apologize since he was also our matchmaker. And make sure you pay the compensation properly. I'll be claiming a division of assets and also compensation from your affair partner. He looked at me as if I was a different creature and said, acting all high and mighty just because you're on the back foot. Then he struck me. Realizing he had crossed a line, Phil probably felt he was in real trouble. I recorded that just now. Look, I've reached my limit too. If you don't want a divorce, we'll at least have to stop living together. I'll be leaving the day after tomorrow, on Saturday. The family tea shop was concerned about me. So the owner had increased our transactions, and most of the shop's profits came from the inn. Therefore, Phil had no escape. I had announced I would be leaving in advance because I didn't want him to obstruct the separation. So I had packed my bags already. On the day, I made Phil tell his family I was leaving right then. Everyone was sitting at the breakfast table as if nothing was unusual. Then, like children, they all asked in unison, "What about breakfast?" Seeing the three of them say that, I couldn't help but start laughing. I want to end our living together. The only reason we had breakfast was that Kathy made it, and you should have been more grateful. Everyone started hurling insults, but Phil slammed the table and shouted loudly. Anyway, I want to separate. It'll be trouble if we don't. Everyone needs to take care of themselves. Let's go, Kathy. He pulled my hand. For a moment, I wished he had done this much earlier. I shook off his hand and said, "We probably won't see each other again. Useless women will disappear. Goodbye." Saying that, I walked ahead of Phil. We stayed in a hotel for a while. A few days later, Phil didn't return to the hotel. After waiting a day, I checked the company's bank account and found that all the money had been withdrawn. It was clear that Phil had run away. Seeing the balance at zero, I couldn't hide my shaking hands. Months had passed, and I had returned to work at the inn. The money I had saved for my dream was untouched. I used that money to buy a small single-family home. It was the prefabricated house that caught my eye the day I reunited with Amy. It reminded me of the house where I lived with my family when I was young. I wanted to start over here. Thinking this, the day after Phil disappeared, I called the management company. And a few weeks later, I had successfully purchased the house. One holiday, I was in the garden when I heard a familiar voice. "Kathy. Good to see you looking well." Entering the property were the three former in-laws. "Why are you here?" I coldly asked, and the three seemed to step back a bit. But their presumptuous attitude hadn't changed. "It's quite a nice house, isn't it? We came because we heard you built a house. We went to the store, but it was closed." "Where's Phil?" As he said this, He unceremoniously opened the front door and walked in. Please stop. Don't come in. Do you know what living within your means? It's a waste for just two people to live here. From today, we will live here. If you don't want to live with us, you can leave. Oh. But you will pay the bills. You were poor originally, so you can live anywhere, right? We're having a tough time right now. Families should help each other, shouldn't they? I looked at my former mother-in-law, who tapped my shoulder with disdain. Ah. These people don't understand what they are doing. Even if I refuse and stay still, they enter. But they have no chance of getting their way, not even an inch. Oh, former family. I wanted to help. Just as I said that, a melody from hell reached our ears. The sound of a police car. I've called the police. What are you doing entering someone's house like this? It would be terrible if Kathy got hurt. Come here. Who are these people? Amy was shouting from a grand staircase. Yes, this is Amy's house. It's true that I bought a new house nearby, but today I was just visiting Amy's house. As the sirens blared, the former in-laws seemed unable to grasp the situation. Former family? What's that? I'm divorced from Phil, didn't you know? Also, the tea shop you were so proud of? Phil ran away with the shop's money, so it's closed now. Didn't you know? It's unfortunate you came all this way. Maybe too many troubles for even a college graduate to understand? Smiling at them, the former in-laws looked pale as they stared back. Amy continued her convincing act. It was quite a performance. What? Are you Kathy's ex-husband's family? You followed her all the way here? That's scary. The police rushed in just as she made a scene. Officer. This child stalker seems to have entered our house without permission. Amy was making a racket in a room with the windows wide open. Her voice, along with the sirens, drew the neighbors' attention. My in-laws lived in the neighboring town, known for its family business for generations. The area also had many acquaintances. Isn't that the son of Morgan from the tea shop? With that remark from the elderly man, everyone looked at my former father-in-law. He had a puzzled look on his face. But he and the other two were pushed into the police car and taken away. We might need to ask you some more questions. As the police officer said this, I watched the police car carrying the former in-law family drive away, and felt a sense of relief that it was finally over. That day, Amy and I drank until morning. We raised a toast. It almost went according to plan. I had thought that my in-law family might come someday. On the day I reunited with Amy, we made a plan. First, I wanted to leave my in-laws' house peacefully and get Phil to sign the divorce papers. I didn't want to get entangled in a messy situation any further. So, I told Phil that it would be a divorce if he didn't agree to separate from his family. And I made him write the divorce papers for the day I specified. On the day we carried out the separation, I showed Phil tearing up a fake copy. I had intentionally left a reasonable amount of money in one company account, making it obvious, and transferred the rest to my account. I said I didn't want the money, but Amy insisted I should take it. In a way, his despicable behavior helped the plan. Actually, the woman Phil had been involved with, pretending to be single, was a friend of Amy's. Amy's friend thought Phil was single and was talking about getting married someday. I didn't claim any compensation for the affair, but I encouraged Amy's friend, who had been deceived, to demand money. Shocked by the amount of the compensation, Phil fled. Moreover, that friend turned out to be the daughter of the president of the company where the former sister-in-law worked. It's a relatively large town, but you can expect connections anywhere. It's a typical countryside thing. My sister-in-law, of course, didn't know she was Phil's affair partner. But suspicions were cast her way, and after an investigation into her conduct, which included coercing young male employees into meals and committing power harassment, she was prompted to resign voluntarily. My father-in-law had also been receiving part of the tea shop's profits as a nominal manager. But since Phil had fled with the money from the company account, the transfers stopped, leading them here. Afterward, the three were detained for about 2 days due to a misunderstanding and home invasion being their first offense, and since no one was injured, they were released. However, in such circumstances, it was impossible for the 5 adults who had lived in a large home to maintain it. And now they seemed to be living in a small, run-down apartment, constantly fighting. Even with high educational backgrounds, a 65-year-old former father-in-law, a 60-year-old former mother-in-law who had hardly worked, and a former sister-in-law effectively fired for harassment had no significant job prospects. And since they had been tyrannical, no one seemed willing to help them. As for Phil, the president, enraged by his daughter being deceived, found Phil's location. And it appears Phil was put on a fishing boat and is now repaying the compensation. Now, I am spending my days leisurely in this small house. There are no more suffocating situations. I don't plan to marry anytime soon. Amy, my best friend who still visits to check on me, and I want to enjoy our time calmly in this house. The times of misery, anger, and hatred are over. I felt a refreshing breeze caress my cheeks. I came over to play. Naturally, I turned towards the voice and smiled. My dream was to create a place where my family could always smile. Now, I am facing forward firmly, intending to live without forgetting to smile again.